or the first wild card game that we have is the Houston Texans, who destroyed Joe Flacco and the Cleveland Browns. Joe Flacco threw 2 pick sixes. Didn't see that coming. Thought he was leading them to the promised land. Myles Garrett did nothing. He was not available. I don't know where he was. And Chus, you had something you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's really crazy that Myles Garrett is still considered the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a very talented player, and I do think that he probably could have won Defensive Player of the Year a couple of years ago, just based on his stats and whatnot compared to other people's. But what are you laughing about?
A couple of years ago.
I mean, he could have. I mean, he definitely might have had maybe an argument, but I don't know.
Are you saying with today's stats a couple of years ago, or
no, maybe a couple of years ago with his stats?
Oh,
like
okay.
Maybe, like not now. No.
What do you got? You keep going.
So I don't think necessarily that Myles Garrett should be Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, like, obviously I don't have the stat for pressures because I know that comes into a giant form for the NFL where pressures are a huge thing. But for me, based on Myles Garrett's stats this season, which this is off NFL, over 16 games played, he's had 33 tackles, 42 combined, 26 solo tackles, 14 sacks. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like, it's pretty decent, but I mean, I don't really see it as like that crazy numbers where you're like, oh my gosh, this guy needs to be Defensive Player of the Year. Like, he is outright the favorite. I mean, I feel like if you want to compare him to, I have 4 other guys that I have tabbed up that probably have pretty comparable stats to Myles Garrett, that, one of them isn't even in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, which, Josh is going to appreciate that. But, like I said, it's nothing against Myles Garrett, but I mean, yes, they went, 11-6 this year and their defense was really, really good, but I don't know if he should be the distinct favorite. I feel like it should be a lot more looked at because obviously, all these players that I'm about to mention either got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs or didn't make playoffs at all. So, I mean, there's really no say to be like, oh yeah, well, Myles Garrett took his team to the NFC or the AFC Championship. Well, I mean, he got eliminated in the wild card just like the rest of them. So, first boy I'm going to mention is Micah Parsons, just because I feel like he is also a very strong candidate. He played 17 games. He had 36 tackles, which is 3 more than Myles Garrett, but obviously he has that extra game. We'll give him that. He has 64 combined totals, 28 solos, 14 sacks. So pretty close to Myles Garrett, I would say that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you want to give it to Myles Garrett, I mean, obviously Micah Parsons should be probably in competition for that too. I mean, that's just my opinion. And then you go ahead.
Do you want the quarterback pressures? I have the quarterback pressures here.
Yeah, give me Myles Garrett's quarterback pressures.
So Myles Garrett has 37 quarterback pressures. He ranks 10th in the NFL. Micah Parsons is 6th in the NFL, and he has 43 quarterback pressures. Let's also keep in mind, Micah Parsons is a linebacker, so while he rushes the quarterback a lot, he is also in coverage a lot. So that's an important thing to remember.
Which is still very impressive considering he ranks 6th. So that's Micah Parsons. And obviously already at that point, if you want to put in pressures, he has more than Myles Garrett. Yes, like I said, 1 more game played, because on this stat tracker it says 16. So obviously somewhere Myles Garrett was not playing. I don't follow Cleveland Browns football, so I can't tell you when it was, but I'm sure he obviously didn't play. Next up, we have your boy from Cincinnati, Trey Hendrickson. The reason I bring him up is because he actually almost beat out TJ Watt, who I'll bring up in a minute here, for sacks this year. Nobody's talking about him. He had 28 tackles. He had 43 combined. He had 25 solos and 17 and a half sacks, which I think is pretty dang good considering, I'm not gonna like knock on you guys at all, but like I know your defense kind of struggled at points this season. So to have that competitive of a player, not be even in the conversation for defensive player of the year kind of upsets me, because I think Trey Hendrickson is a really good player, and I was actually kind of worried that he was gonna pass TJ Watt for most sacks. And I think the fact that he's not even in the betting odds is really shocking to me. And then Max Crosby, another one, 17 games played. He had a total of 90 tackles, apparently, 55 solos, 35 assists, 14 and a half sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. What? That's insane.
And he has 50 pass rushes. He's second.
That's unbelievable. And his betting odd right now is like plus 5,000. I get that the Raiders weren't good, but like, come on, like sometimes like you got to think a little bit bigger than just, the team itself. Like, yes, I mean, I get that Myles Garrett, like, led his team to the promised land of the 5th seed or whatever. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty exciting for Cleveland, but I mean, like, okay, Max Crosby was probably the highlight of Raiders football this season. I mean, there was a lot of dark moments in Raiders football this season, but, hoping for positives, looking up for Las Vegas coming up here. But then you go in with TJ Watt as the last guy. Based on NFL, he has 40. Go ahead.
Max Crosby, according to Pro Football Reference, only has 3 missed tackles, and his missed tackle percentage is 3.2%.
That's unbelievable.
Is one of the best in the NFL. To give you context, TJ Watt has 9 missed tackles and an 11.7% missed tackle percentage. Nick Bosa is 7%, so 3.2 is absolutely insane for Max Crosby. But continue.
And I was gonna say, like, I know sometimes they also consider who you're playing for, and like, well, if you're not making a big run, then it doesn't really matter. But I don't know. I think Max Crosby should still be up there, considering he's plus 5,000, and I mean, he kind of kept Vegas in some games. I'm not going to say every game because Vegas did struggle this year, but I do think that Max Crosby is a good player, and I do think that he should be considered a higher amount more than he is. And then obviously with the Steelers, I'm not even biased with this. I just wanted to compare it. But like he has 48 tackles, TJ Watt, 68 combined, 39 solos, 19 sacks. So, I mean, if you're looking at all these other players, Myles Garrett should not be the outright favorite and should not be like negative 300 right now. I disagree with that 100% because there are 4 other guys that probably have pretty comparable stats, if not better stats in certain categories than Myles Garrett. And I get it. I get Myles Garrett took Cleveland or helped Cleveland. I can't say he took, but he helped Cleveland get to that wild card spot. But in fairness, so did TJ Watt. Micah Parsons did too. I mean, Trey Hendrickson pushed for that wild card spot up until the end, until the Bengals got eliminated in week 16 or 17 or whatever week it was. So obviously, like, all of these guys, I think, are really good candidates. Trey Hendrickson he's not even going to get looked at. But I mean, you still have like 4 other guys that they really need to consider, and I really just disagree with the Myles Garrett thing. I mean, if he wins it, great for him, but I personally think that this year's Defensive Player of the Year is really not very set in stone. I think it should be more or less like very well looked at, because I feel like these defenders this year were very even, I would say. I don't really think there was one better excelling player than Myles Garrett or any of these other players, like one or the other. Because every year it kind of seems like when TJ Watt won it, it was kind of like, yeah, you kind of assume that, like, based on his production, etc. Like different players when they've won it have kind of been set in that way. But that's just me. I'm just kind of frustrated with it. I mean, obviously that defense didn't show up against Houston. I get that they were in Houston, and I get that it's hard to play in Houston, I guess. But nonetheless, like, their defense did not show up. So, I mean, but then again, neither did Micah Parsons' defense. So I don't really know. And then TJ Watt didn't play in the wild card game. So for the Steelers. So I guess we'll never know.
So something that's important is the voting takes place at the end of the regular season. So voting's already occurred. Preseason or postseason, excuse me, doesn't necessarily have an impact on that because the voting has already occurred.
Okay.
But the only person of the people you named off who is less quarterback pressures than Myles Garrett is Trey Hendrickson, who only has 35. TJ Watt and Max Crosby are tied at 50. That missed tackle percentage is insane for Max Crosby. The sacks, obviously TJ leads there. Myles Garrett, it looks like he is just, I guess, arguing more consistently across the board. But again, I don't know what that means. Also, we're only talking about pass rushers here. What about guys like Deron Bland, who set the pick-6 regular season record?
Yeah, that's
coming
another
out
thing.
of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I was just talking about those guys, but you're not even talking about the guys like even further back. So, I mean, there's so many other really good there. I mean, there are so, I don't mean to say there's anybody but Myles Garrett, because like I said, I do not take that the wrong way. I think Myles Garrett is a very talented player, and regardless if he plays for the Cleveland Browns or not, I think he is a phenomenal player and he's great for that defense. But I really think that he shouldn't be just the all out like favorite when there were so many talented defenders this year.
For sure. Well, that's some good thoughts following that Browns Texans
Thanks
game.
for watching that video, guys. If you want to check out a most recent full episode of No Buts About It, that's going to be right over here. Yeah, right there. Check that out. And if you just want to see more short clips, we're going to have one right over here for you to watch. Check out No Buts About It on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to podcasts, so you can listen to us on the go. Once again, have a great day and go do something nice for someone.